Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Hey, Daf 45 of Masechta Shabbis. Oh gosh, 1 second. Time out. 1 second. That's better. Okay, so let's do a quick overview of the page. So, alright, so first we're gonna do a little bit of exploring of Reb Shimon's opinion when it comes to muktza, which is like a little bit unclear, right? Like technically he like doesn't hold a muktza, right? But he like kind of does at the same time. So we're gonna go a little bit deeper into that. We're gonna spend a little time understanding Rebbe's opinion on muktza. Does he hold like Rabbi Yehuda? Does he hold like Reb Shimon? We'll find out. And then we're gonna do the same thing with Rabbi Yochanan. Does Rabbi Yochanan hold like Rabbi Yehuda? Does he hold like Reb Shimon? So that's the overview for the page. It's interesting that like we generally view muktza through the lens of like Rabbi Yehuda being yes muktza, Reb Shimon being no muktza. Yet there's all sorts of opinions when it comes to muktza. We've also seen like the opinion of Rabbi Meir, who says that there's muktza when it's muktza machmas iser. We've seen the opinion of Rabbi Nechemya, who has like the strongest, most strict opinion when it comes to muktza. Anyways, so it's kind of interesting that it's always kind of viewed as either you hold like Rabbi Yehuda or Reb Shimon, but there are other opinions. Alright, let's get started. Daf Mem Hey, Amud Aleph, about 5 or 6 lines into the page. Vrav Kabu the Svirle. So we finished off yesterday by saying that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to muktza, that he holds of muktza. But however, V'abau Minei D'Rav, but they asked a kasha from Rav. What do they ask him? So these chabare, it's come up a few times I think already that like in Persia they had these rules that on like their special holidays, so there's no lighting candles outside of their fancy like houses of worship. So it's either you light candles in their house of worship or nowhere. So therefore if it's one of their like holidays where you're not supposed to be lighting candles anywhere outside of their houses of worship, well then you can get in trouble, right? And there's these chabare. These chabare were like these very extreme faction in Persian society where they like to kind of cause trouble with the Jews, and it was dangerous therefore to have your Hanukkah candles outside of your house with these chabare people around. So they asked Rav, if it's Hanukkah, if it's Shabbos Hanukkah, and you have your Hanukkah menorah outside of your house, and you want that once they finish burning, you can bring them in as quickly as possible, so to avoid any issues with the chabare. So they asked Rav, can you bring in your Hanukkah menorah under those circumstances? He says, yeah, sure, no problem. No. So the Gemara wants to say that the fact that Rav said that it's no problem means that clearly the Hanukkah menorah isn't muktza. And if it isn't muktza, that must mean that he holds like Reb Shimon, who doesn't hold of muktza. So why are we saying that Rav holds like Rabbi Yehuda? So my answer is Shas Adachak Shiny. No. That was, what's it called? Extenuating circumstances? I think that's the word. But that was a unique situation in that it was dangerous. You had these chabare walking around, and if they would see the Hanukkah candles, or even the remnants of the Hanukkah candles, you could be in big trouble with them. So, because of the fact that it was a dangerous situation, that is why Rav allowed these people to bring in their menorahs. But in general, he would hold of muktza, and he would hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Da'amrle Rav Kahana Rav Asi Lirav, because Rav Kahana and Rav Asi even then asked Rav, they said, Hachi Yochasa? Wait a second, Rav, is this really the halacha? That you could just move a menorah, that there's no muktza? Amrlu, he said to them, Kedayu Reb Shimon nismoch alav b'shas adachak. He said, no, I hold like Rabbi Yehuda that there is muktza. However, you can rely on Reb Shimon when it comes to shas adachak in extenuating circumstance. You can hold like Reb Shimon. Wow. Awesome. But in general, Rav would hold like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay. Ba minei Rish Lakish mi Rabbi Yochanan. So now Rish Lakish asks a question from Rabbi Yochanan. Chitim shezaran bekarka. If you have a seeds of wheat and you planted them in the ground. Okay. Or if you have eggs that are under a chicken. Now these are both situations where you're clearly not planning on using these for a while, anytime soon, right? When you plant some seeds in the ground, you're not planning on taking them out the next day and eating them, right? You are planning to leave them there until they turn into a wheat stalk, right? So, or even eggs that are under a chicken, I assume that the point here is you didn't take them to eat, you didn't take them to use the eggs, and you're deciding that you're going to leave them there until they become chickens. So you're waiting, you're not planning on taking them anytime soon. So Mahu. So Rish Lakish wants to know what Reb Shimon would say when it comes to these planted seeds and these eggs that are under the chicken. Would Reb Shimon admit that in that case, they would be considered muktza? That you have no intention of using them because you're allowing them to kind of wait for a while? So do we say Kileis Leil Reb Shimon muktza? So do we say that, well, when we say that Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muktza, that's only in a place where you didn't specifically do anything to show that you have no interest in it. Right? However, but in a situation like this, where he specifically takes this seed, puts it in the ground, and is essentially saying, I'm never going to get back to you until you become a wheat stalk, right? Or I guess even in the context of the chickens, he's basically saying, all right, I'm waiting until these chickens actually hatch into chicks. Well, then in that case, he would say muktza because he's explicitly showing that he has no intention of using these items over Shabbos. Or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it doesn't matter. He doesn't hold of muktza, and that is that. And therefore, even a seed that you planted in the ground or eggs that are under a chicken would not be muktza. And if you wanted to go and chop them, you can go and chop them. Amalei. So Rabbi Yochanan responds to Rish Lakish, Ein muktza le Reb Shimon ela shemen shebener b'shashu dolek. So Rabbi Yochanan responds to Rish Lakish, Reb Shimon does not hold of muktza, except, what's the only exception? When you have a candle that is lit, so the oil that is in the candle while it is lit is muktza. How come? For 2 reasons. It's huktzah l'mitzvaso, right? It's right now, as long as the candle is lit, so you're doing the mitzvah of lighting a candle on Friday night in your home. So therefore, it's right now, part of that mitzvah. So therefore, you can't touch it, you can't use it. And also, v'huktzah li'isuro. And it's also set aside because of the isser. What's the isser? Well, if you take any of that oil, well then, you're going to be violating the melacha of mechabe. Right? Because by taking out some of the oil, you are basically putting it out sooner. It'll extinguish sooner because there's less oil. So therefore, for those 2 reasons, because it's right now, this oil is being used in the context of mitzvah, as well as because if you were to remove the oil, you're going to be violating mechabe. So for those 2 reasons, that is why the oil that is in a candle while it is lit will be muktza. But other than that, no muktza. And therefore this seed that you planted or these eggs that are under the chicken, not muktza, according to Reb Shimon. And that is how Reb Yochanan responds to Rish Lakish. Okay? Very good. But the Gemara wants to know, V'leis huktzah l'mitzvaso? 1 second. We just said, or not we, but Rabbi Yochanan just said that the only time that Reb Shimon holds of muktza is when you have something that has 2 types of muktzas. One is that it's set aside to be part of this mitzvah right now. And the other is that it's set aside in that, if you use it, you'll be doing a malacha. But 1 second. Is huktzah l'mitzvaso not enough? You need both of those factors, both huktzah l'mitzvaso and huktzah l'isur. If it was only something that's set aside to be used for a mitzvah alone, that wouldn't be enough to make it muktza on Shabbos. V'atanya, but we learn in a brisa, sikcha kilchasa. If you have a sukkah on Sukkot and you put on proper schach, and then you design it with all sorts of tapestries. And you hung from the schach nuts, afarsekin, peaches, shkedim, almonds, vrimonin, pomegranates, va'parkele shel hanovim, clusters of grapes, va'atar shel shibolin, and bundles of wheat, yenos, shmanim, v'saltos, all sorts of bottles of wine and oil and flour. Very, very cool. We saw this brisa once before. We say also the stapik man at Motzai Yom Tov Achron. So you're not allowed to use any of these beautiful decorations until Sukkot is over. Okay, and if he made a Tanai, so it's based on his Tanai. Fine. A condition. No. So what do we see? We see in this brisa, we don't know who the author is yet, technically speaking, but we see in this brisa that when it comes to the Sukkah decorations, so since they are being used for the mitzvah of Sukkah for the entire duration of Sukkot, so you can't use these decorations because they're part of the mitzvah the entire Sukkot. Now, there it's not muktza le'isuro. Therefore, there it's not necessarily muktza le'isuro. Meaning, what isur will you be violating if you take down the decorations? Sure, you can be maybe taking down a tent, but that would only be on Shabbos. What about the days of Chol HaMoed? You'd be able to take it down. The only reason why you can't take it down is because muktza le'mitzvasa. So it would sound like from this brisa that even muktza le'mitzvasa would be enough to say that it's muktza. Then the Gemara says, yeah, but how do we know that brisa is Reb Shimon, right? Obviously, this would only teach us that Reb Shimon says that muktza mitzvah was enough if that brisa is actually Reb Shimon. So the Gemara answers, the Tani Reb Chia bar Yosef kamid Reb Yochanan, because Reb Chia bar Yosef taught in front of Reb Yochanan. A notlin eitzim min asukeh biyomtiv ele min asamuch lav Reb Shimon matir. Okay, so this is interesting. When it says sukkah here, it's not actually talking about like your sukkah on the festival of Sukkot. It's talking about actually the festival of Pesach, the festival of Shavuos. And for this festival, you made yourself a nice, awesome, chill hut. That's where you're going to be hanging out. You made yourself a hut, and that's where you're going to be chilling on Pesach and on Shavuos. Sounds fun. And to build this hut, you built it with wood. Okay? And we're saying, a notlim eitzim min asukah b'yomtiv ela min asamuch la. You can't take any of the wood from this hut on Yom Tov, right? Meaning, and we're not talking about where you take it down because then it would be an issue of taking down a tent, but we're talking about, let's say a piece of wood even fell down, right? A piece of wood fell down. So, at this point, so there's no isser, you're not doing anything wrong. It's a piece of wood, it fell down. Can I use this piece of wood? So we're saying no. Ein nodlin eitzim min asukah b'yom tov. Ein nodlin min asukah b'yom tov. Right, so if it falls down, you're not allowed to take from this wood because it's muktza. Now it's not muktza the mitzvah, so this isn't sukkahs where this hut, this is like part of the mitzvah of sukkah. No. It's just stam. You had built this hut for Yom Tov. A piece of wood fell down. Can you use it? So we say no, it's muktza because it was part of the hut and you didn't intend to be using it. But if you have some wood outside of the hut, that's kind of somehow giving support to the hut, but it's not really, connected and built into the hut. So then you can move it. It's not a big deal. Reb Shimon matir. Reb Shimon says no. If this piece of wood falls down from the hut, you can move it. Who cares? It's not muktza l'mitzvaso, and therefore it's not muktza. Vishavin, however, both Reb Shimon and the Tanakama agree that besukas achag b'chag shehi asura. That when it comes to the sukkah from the festival of sukkah, well then it would be, even if you have some schach that falls down, you would not be allowed to use that schach because it was set aside for the mitzvah of sukkah for the entire sukkahs. And if he makes some kind of a condition, then it's based on his condition. So what do we see? So we see that Reb Shimon agrees that when it comes to Sukkos, if some of the schach were to fall down, you wouldn't be allowed to use it because it's hooked to the mitzvah, so it's set aside to be used in the context of the mitzvah for the entire duration of Sukkos. So therefore, we see that according to Reb Shimon, if something is set aside for a mitzvah, that is enough to make it muktza. So why did we say earlier that the oil that's in the candle is both set aside for the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, but also it's connected to an isser, which is that if you remove the oil, it'll be mechabe? So my answer is no. It means ke'ein shemen shebener ka'aminon. No, we're saying that it's like shemen shebener. What does that mean? Ho v'huktzeh lemitzvaso huktzeh li'isuro. That since the candle, that the oil in the candle is huktzah, is set aside for the mitzvah, right? The mitzvah of Shabbos candles. Therefore, huktzah li'isuro. That is why we treat it as if it's ke'ilu also huktzah li'isuro. But huktzah li'isuro isn't in and of itself going to make something muktza according to Reb Shimon. But since it's already muktza for the mitzvah, so then we throw in also huktzah li'isuro. But really it's because since it is huktzah for the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, that is why we say that it's going to be muktzah, and we also consider it to be, huktzah li'isuro, that we're concerned about, mechabe. But the real reason is really huktzah l'mitzvah. So itmar nami amar Reb Chia bar Abba amar Reb Yochanan ein muktzah l'Reb Shimon, right? That Reb Chia bar Abba says in the name of Reb Yochanan that there's no muktzah for Reb Shimon, ela ke'ein shemen shebener. Rather, like things that are similar to oil that is in a candle, b'shau shu dolek, as long as when the candle is lit. Because since you have the oil in the candle is set aside for the mitzvah of Shabbos candles, so therefore also we say not to take anything from it, because also it will be the issue of mechabe. But really the muktza reason for this oil in the candle is because it is set aside for the mitzvah of Shabbos candles. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Says Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, Ein muktzah l'Reb Shimon ela grogos v'tzimukim belvad. Okay. Now comes Rav Yehuda in the name of Shmuel, and he says that Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muktzah, except in the case of dried figs and raisins. Okay. What's the deal with dried figs and raisins? Because basically, I'm no expert here. Maybe if somebody is, they can let us know. But my understanding from Rashi is that when it comes to drying fruit, so you take the fruit, you put it like up on your roof or something like that, and then basically it starts out just as regular fresh fruit, and it starts drying out by the sun. Now once it starts drying out for the sun, there's a period of time where you can't eat it. It's like rotten. It's no good. During that time you can't eat it. And then after, I don't know how long it takes, a few weeks, I don't know, months, I don't know, however long it takes, then it becomes a dried fruit and you can now eat it. So when it's fresh, you can eat it, and when it's dried, you can eat it, but in the in-between stage, you can't eat it. So what Rav Yehuda is saying, what Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel is saying, is that when you take figs and grapes and you put them up on your roof, and you've left them ready for a few days, and they become inedible, well, they're not ra'ui b'chlal. There's really nothing that you can do with them. And therefore, even Reb Shimon would admit that they are muktzah, I guess, kind of like money on Shabbos as well. There's nothing that you can do with it. Right? Okay, fine. Umidi acharina lo? 1 second. But Reb Shimon wouldn't say that there's any other examples of muktzah other than, drying figs and grapes? But we learn in a brisa, if you have a person who was Shabbos and he's eating figs, and there were leftover figs, he didn't eat all of them, there were some left over. So you know what he did? So he said, you know what? Alright, I'm not going to finish these figs right now. How about this? Let me go put them on the roof, and I'll leave them there for, however long it takes, and then I'll have dried figs. Banavim, if he was eating grapes, and there were leftover grapes, and he said, you know what, let me bring them up to the roof. I'll just leave them there so that they get dried out, and I'll have some raisins. So, again, this is happening on Shabbos. And now he takes these leftover figs and grapes, puts them up on the roof. They're still fresh grapes. He just put them on the roof 2 seconds ago. They're still fresh grapes. And we say what? Lo yochal ad sheyazmin. You can no longer eat them anymore on Shabbos until, you would specifically have intention, set them aside before Shabbos to eat them. Because once you put them up on the roof, it's already considered muktza. Now, these aren't figs and grapes that are already like in the process of drying out, where like they would be inedible. No, you were just eating them 2 seconds ago. You put them up on the roof. You could theoretically take them back down and eat them, but we say no. Once you put it on the roof and you like show that your intent is that you're not planning on looking at these guys again for a few weeks or however long it takes, you can no longer eat them anymore. We say the same thing with peaches, quinces, whatever you would put up on the roof, you can no longer eat. And all other types of fruits. And money. Who's the author of this brisa? Rabbi Yehuda. If we say that Rabbi Yehuda is the author of this brisa, well, Rabbi Yehuda, it takes much less than this for him to say that things are muktza. Even things that just, random things that, chatzotzres, right? You didn't do anything to these chatzotzres, these horns. They're just lying there, and still Rabbi Yehuda would say that they're muktza. Well, and certainly when I specifically take something and bring it up to my roof and put it down on my roof and essentially say, I'm not going to look at you for another, month or so, whatever. So certainly then he would say that it's muktza. So I don't need this brisa to teach me that Rabbi Yehuda would say that this is muktza. Elalab, Reb Shimoni. It must be that the author of this brisa is Reb Shimon. And what are we saying? And we're saying that Reb Shimon would say that once he brings them up to the roof, muktza. So it's not just, figs and grapes that are in the middle of drying and are in their kind of awkward stage where they're inedible. No, even if I literally just show intent that I'm not interested in eating these fruits because I put them on the roof, Reb Shimon would say that would be enough to make them muktza. No. The Olam Rabbi Yehuda. Really, it is Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, well then, what's the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda? Obviously, you would say that when I bring something up to the roof and basically, show my intent not to look at them again for a few weeks, that he's going to say that it's muktza. Yeah, but the chiddush is that he was just eating them 2 seconds ago. It would enter my mind to say that since he was just eating them 2 seconds ago, and then he brought them up to the roof, right? And then he changed his mind again, and he says, you know what, actually I want to eat them. Well, why should it be any different now than it was 5 minutes ago when he was eating them? So I might think that would be okay. I can go back on the roof after I change my mind and eat them. So Kamash Malon, Kevin Dehelon, Legag, Asuche Asche, Ledaite Minau. So the chiddush, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is that once he brings it up to the roof, that's it. There's Hesach Hadas. He's not thinking about these fruits anymore, and he would no longer be able to change his mind and decide that he's going to eat them. That is the chiddush of Rabbi Yehuda. But Reb Shimon, we would stick to the same statement, understanding of Reb Shimon, which is that the only things that would be muktza, according to Reb Shimon, would be these figs and grapes while they're in the middle of drying and inedible. So Rebbe's son Reb Shimon asked him, Patz'ile Tamara, Reb Shimon Mao. What would Reb Shimon say about Patz'ile Tamara? What are Patz'ile Tamara? So basically what they would do is they would harvest, at least sometimes they would harvest dates when they were not yet fully ripe. And then they would, bring them to the market, whatever it is, and they'd ripen over time, maybe while they were traveling to the market or just in your house, whatever it was, but they would pick them before they're actually ripe. Okay? And let's say you wanted to eat these things before they're properly ripe. And I think that this is, I've heard at least, I don't know. Again, if somebody knows, maybe let us, because this is kind of interesting. But I've heard that they do that with a lot of like the produce that we eat. That they'll pick, let's say, apples and stuff before they're actually ripe, and they have a whole process of shipping until we actually get to it in the store and then bring it home. And they actually pick them before they're properly ripe, and then they ripen during the process. That's what I've heard. I don't know if it's true though. And anyways, so Reb Shimon Rebbe asked Rebbe what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai would say about, can I eat these dates that are not fully mature yet? Amrle, so Rebbe said to him, Ein muktza Reb Shimon ela grogros v'tzimukin bilvad. Reb Shimon only holds of muktza by grogros and tzimukin that are, mamish inedible right now. But I guess that these dates are edible even if they're not fully ripe, and therefore they would not be muktza. Okay. Now the Gemara wants to assume that because Rebbe is answering what Reb Shimon's opinion would be regarding muktza, the Gemara wants to assume that Rebbe is basically saying that he holds like Reb Shimon regarding muktza. So the Gemara is trying to say, wait, but is that really true? Rebbe leislei muktza? Does Rebbe not hold of muktza? V'atnan, but we learn in a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah in Beitza. What does it say, Darton? In mashkin v'shochatin es hamidbarios of a mashkin v'shochatin es habaisos. So apparently, before you slaughter an animal, you want to give it epis to drink first. It makes it easier to remove the skin or something like that. So we say that midbarios. These are kind of animals that are grazing just on their own, like in the desert, right? So these midbarios animals, we do not give them water to drink and then slaughter them on Yom Tov. But domesticated animals, let's say you have a sheep that you have in your property, so then you would be allowed to give it to drink and to shecht it on Yom Tov. Okay? Vitanium, we learn in a brayso, Elu ein midbarios. The following would qualify as these midbarios animals that you would not shecht on Yom Tov. An animal that, leaves the city, Pesach time, and it just kind of hangs out on its own for about 7 months and comes back in Mar Cheshvan, in the Chodesh of Cheshvan, in the month of Cheshvan. That is a midbarios. Baisos, what are considered like domesticated animals? Animals that during the day, they leave the city to go out and graze, but then they come back into the city to rest at night. So those are considered domesticated. Rebbe Omer also says Rebbe, Elu ve'elu baisosein. No, both of these definitions, as far as I'm concerned, says Rebbe, would be considered domesticated. Even if they go out for 7 months and come back. Ve'elu ein midbarios. These are what's considered midbarios. Kol sheroz ba'afar ve'ein ichnasus liyishuv lo b'mos hacham v'lo b'mos hagushamim. The definition of midbarios animals would be animals that leave the city, that never even come into the city, right? They live outside of the city, and that is that. Those are midbarios animals. And those you would not be able to shecht on Yom Tov. Now, the Gemara wants to assume that since Rebbe is chiming in on this machlokes about, would it be considered muktza or not, right? Meaning, why wouldn't I be able to shecht midbarios? Because they're muktza, I can't shecht them. So from the fact that Rabbi Yehuda is chiming in this machlokes about what would be considered midbarios, which would be considered muktza, and you wouldn't be able to shecht them on Yom Tov, so then it must be that Rebbe does hold of muktza. So it's weird. On the one hand, we want to assume that Rebbe doesn't hold of muktza because he's responding to his son regarding Reb Shimon's opinion. Yet at the same time, he's also, arguing regarding the definition of midbarios so that we can figure out if it would be considered muktza or not. So it sounds like he would hold of muktza, like Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara gives 3 possible answers. One answer is to say that, sure, he holds like Reb Shimon that there's no muktza. And what he's saying is that these midbarios would be considered muktza because they're like grogros v'tzimukin. They're like drying, they're these figs and grapes that are in the drying process that they're, that you basically sent them away for a while, right? And right, these fruits are not fit right now. And also these animals, also they're away, They live outside the city, and it would be a mess. It's like not simple to get them back. Okay? So therefore, we want to say that really Rebbe doesn't hold of muktza. But just like Reb Shimon, who doesn't hold of muktza, admits that by grogos v'tzimukin, they would be muktza. So also these midbarios, which are similar, would also be muktza. Okay? Or you could say that Rebbe does hold of muktza, like Reb Yehuda. And when he was answering about Reb Shimon's opinion to his son, that's because his son asked him about Reb Shimon's opinion. Right? His son asked him, what would Reb Shimon say about these unripe dates? And Rebbe answered, Reb Shimon would say that they are not muktza. But that doesn't mean that Rebbe holds like Reb Shimon, he holds like Reb Yehuda. He was just answering what Reb Shimon would say. He, by same, or if you want to, will say that he does hold like Reb Shimon. And in this brisa about midbarios versus baisos, he's just saying, look, I don't hold of muktza. I'm a Reb Shimon guy. But you people who hold like Rabbi Yehuda that there is muktza, and you want to say that midbarios would not be considered, that midbarios would be muktza and therefore you can't check them, and you're defining midbarios as those that go out after Pesach and come back at Cheshvan, Rebbe says, look, I disagree with your definition. I think that would still be baisos. It's only midbarios if it mamash is outside the city, right? So Rav Ibai Sema l'divreim d'Rabbanan kamalu, right? He's responding to the Chachamim in this brisa. L'didi leisli muktza klal. Look, I don't hold of muktza. I'm a Reb Shimon guy. But according to you, Rabbanan, that you do hold of muktza, and therefore you want to say that midbarios would be muktza and you can't check them on Yom Tif. Well, oduli mias, but you must admit to me de'echa deyotzos bepesach v'nichnasos bervia debaisos ninu. That, in the situation where these animals, leave the city Pesach time and come back Mar Cheshvan, they would not be midbarios. Those would be baisos. Rabbanan amru leilo midbarios ninu. To which Rabbanan responded, no, we don't agree with you. Those would also be considered midbarios. But Rabbi would hold like Reb Shimon that there's no muktza. So 3 ways to understand, sort of understand these different contexts that where Rebbe might be implying sort of either that he holds like Reb Shimon or that he holds like Reb Yehuda, and we have 3 ways to reconcile those. Let's go weiter. Amar Rav Bar Bachana. Oh, said Rav Bar Bachana. Amar Reb Yochanan. So Rav Bar Bachana says in the name of Reb Yochanan. Amru, they said, as Rashi says, the Bnei Yeshiva, the students of the academy said, Halacha Reb Shimon. Okay, the students of the academy said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon when it comes to muktza. So the Gemara wants to assume from there that we're saying that Reb Yochanan holds like Reb Shimon when it comes to muktza. But the Gemara asks, Umiyam Reb Yochanan Hachi? Would Rabbi Yochanan really hold like Reb Shimon when it comes to muktza? But a certain elder from a place called Kruya or from a place called Sruya asked Rabbi Yochanan, can you move the nest of a hen on Shabbos? Is it muktza or not? To which Rabbi Yochanan said, well, this nest is made for chickens. It's not made for humans. Therefore, you have no business moving it on Shabbos. And therefore, it's muktza. So what does it sound like? It sounds like you hold like Rabbi Yehuda, that there's muktza, right? Not like Reb Shimon. So why would Rabbi Bar Bachana say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that they said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon? So hachav mayaskinan de'izbe efrach meis. So the Gemara says, yeah, really it does hold like Reb Shimon. However, this wasn't just a plain old nest. This was a nest that had a dead chick in it. And because there's a dead chick in it, even Reb Shimon would say that it's muktza because there's absolutely nothing that you can do with a dead chick. Kind of like money. Reb Shimon would admit that would be muktza. Lemar bar ameimar mishmei derava de'amar modahai Reb Shimon be'balechaim shemesin she'asurin. So the Girsa says Rav, but there's a Agos V'Tzionim, the Gilyon says Rava, so I read it Rava. So this makes sense according to the Mar bar ameimar in the name of Rava, who says that Reb Shimon would admit that when it comes to animals that died, that they are asurin. So you have a dead chicken there, therefore you wouldn't be allowed to move it. There's nothing you can do with it. But my bread of Yosef mishmei de Rava, but my bread of Yosef in the name of Rava, the Amar Chalukay Reb Shimon afilu b'balichaim shemesin shein mutarin, that Reb Shimon would even say when it comes to dead animals that they're mutarin. Well, then Ma'ikal Meimar. So meaning you have this dead chick in the nest. You should still be able to move the nest according to the Ma'abed of Yosef. So if in fact Reb Yochanan holds like Reb Shimon that there's no muktza, so it wouldn't necessarily be a davar pashit that you wouldn't be. I mean, he responded to this ahusava that, well, it's a nest and you can't move it. You have no business moving it on Shabbos. And we said that is specifically only because there was a dead chicken in there, a dead chick. But it's not so clear that just because there's a dead chicken there, Reb Shimon would say that you can't move it. So the Gemara takes a different approach. Oh, here it's talking about where there was an egg in the nest. Okay, that there was a nest and the chicken had laid an egg in the nest, and it was Shabbos, and this elder wanted to know if you could move it, and that's why Rabbi Yochanan said you can't move it, because even Reb Shimon would say that by nolad, right, a beitza, an egg that was laid on Shabbos, it would be muktza. But one second. V'amar Rav Nachman, man de'islei muktza islei nolad, de'islei muktza le'islei nolad. But Rav Nachman said that when it comes to nolad, it has the same sort of rules as muktza. I.e., if you hold of muktza, you hold of nolad. If you don't hold of muktza, you don't hold of nolad. And Reb Shimon doesn't hold of muktza, therefore he doesn't hold of nolad. So therefore it would be no issue, if in fact Rabbi Yochanan holds like Reb Shimon, so it should be no problem for this guy to move this nest that has an egg in it. Doesn't hold of muktza, nor does he hold of nolad. So rather, the izbe beitza sefrach. Rather, it's talking about where there is an egg that actually has a chick in it. Not just a regular egg, but it's an egg that has a chick in it, that in that case it's not fit for anything because, even your dogs won't want to eat it because it has a chick in it, right? So therefore it's not fit for you, it's not fit for your animals, not fit for anything. And therefore, even Reb Shimon would admit, because it's not fit for anything, that you can't move it. Okay, fine. So we've managed to kind of, defend the fact that Rabbi Yochanan could potentially say that the halacha is like Reb Shimon when it comes to muktza. Ki asa Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef Am Reb Yochanan. When Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said the name of Reb Yochanan, halacha Reb Yehuda. Whoa! So Yitzchak says in the name of Reb Yochanan that the halacha is not like Reb Shimon. The halacha is like Reb Yehuda. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi Amar halacha Reb Shimon. Whereas Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. Amar Rav Yosef anu da Amar Rabbi Bar Bachana Amar Reb Yochanan Amru halacha Reb Shimon. Amru v'leilo svirle. To which Rav Yosef responded, aha, now it makes sense. Rabbi Bar Bachana, when he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan, what did he say? He said that they said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. He didn't say Rabbi Yochanan says that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. He said in the yeshiva they said that the halacha is like Reb Shimon. But Rabbi Yochanan didn't agree with that. Rabbi Yochanan holds that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, as we see from the statement of who is this? Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Rabbi Yosef, when he came from Israel. Amalei Abai Rav Yosef. Now Abai says to Rav Yosef, "Ad lo tizba Rabbi Yochanan Rav Yehuda." So Abai says to Rav Yosef, one second. So now, before you heard the statement of Rav Yitzchak, Rav Yosef, who said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, you didn't already know on your own that Rabbi Yochanan held that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda? Ha Rabbi Abba Rabbi Asi iklu levei Rabbi Abba de min Chifa. The Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Asi visited Rabbi Abba de min Chifa. V'nafal menarta al glime de Rabbi Asi. And as fate would have it, a menorah fell on Rav Asi. Oy vey. And guess what? V'lo tiltala. He didn't move it. Aha. So my timer, how come Rabbi Asi didn't move this candelabra that fell on him? Rabbi Asi Talmid Rabbi Yochanan Hava. Is it not because Rabbi Asi was a student of Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Yehuda Svirle? And Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda that there's muktza, and that's why Rabbi Asi didn't want to move this candelabra that fell on him because it's muktza? Right? Rabbi Yehuda says Svirle de Islam muktza? So Abai wanted to say to Rav Yosef that, shouldn't it be obvious from there that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda? So Amarle, so Rav Yosef responded to Abai, no, No, I would not assume from that story necessarily that the halacha that Rabbi Yochanan holds like Rabbi Yehuda. That story involved a candelabra, a menorah. Minarta shiny. And a menorah is different, is unique when it comes to laws of muktza. The Amar Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina, Amar Rabbi Asi, the Rabbi Acha Bar Chanina said the name of Rabbi Asi. Hor Reish Lakish b'Tzidan. The Reish Lakish ruled in Tzidan. Menorah anitelas biado achas mutal taltala. That if you have a candelabra that you can move with one hand, well then, that you can carry with one hand, so you can move it on Shabbos. But if it's a very heavy candelabra that you would need two hands in order to move it, so then you can't move it on Shabbos. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Anu ein lanu el b'ner Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan says, look, all we know is that Reb Shimon would say that a candle that is lit, or no, that a candle, not that is lit, but a candle that has been lit before, i.e. An old candle, a used candle, where Rabbi Yehuda would say that it's muktza machmas meus, Rabbi Shimon says it's not muktza. However, even Rabbi Shimon would say that when it comes to a candle, a menorah, that could be moved either with one hand or two hands, doesn't matter, so then it would be forbidden to move it. So we see that, I don't know, it's possible to argue that Rabbi Yochanan does hold like Rabbi Shimon, right? He's invoking Rabbi Shimon's opinion over here, right? To say that when it comes to an old candle, you can move it, but by menorah, you wouldn't necessarily be able to move it. So maybe I would say that Rabbi Yochanan does hold like Rabbi Shimon, since he's invoking his opinion over here. And that is why, says Rav Yosef, I needed Rav Yitzchak in the name of Rav Yosef, Rav Yitzchak Rav Yosef to report from Eretz Yisrael that Rabbi Yochanan Taka says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda when it comes to muktza and not like Rabbi Shimon. Okay. The time am I, and how come this menorah you wouldn't be allowed to use to move? How come you wouldn't be allowed to move this menorah? So Rabbi Rav Yosef Damri Tarvayu Hova Adam Koveh La Makom. So Rabbi and Rav Yosef both say it's because a person, makes a specific place for this menorah, right? It's not something that you move around easily, a fork. I take the fork out of the drawer, I put it on the table, I move it somewhere else. This is a menorah that you put in a specific place and you're not really planning to move it, right? Because it's something that you're not planning to move, so therefore, it would be considered muktza. Amalei Abai to Rav Yosef. Now Abai says to Rav Yosef, but what about akilas chasanim? Akilas chasanim was like some kind of bridal bed, some kind of, I guess maybe bed that they would sleep in on the night of their wedding. But whatever it was, this bed, basically it was a bed, and then on either end of the bed, right, so there would be like a pole coming up from let's say where your head would be, and also where your feet would be. Then there would be like a beam kind of connecting the two poles, and then they would drape a sheet or something over that, and it would be like a tent almost, okay? So that's what this kilas chasanim is. So you have this kilas chasanim, that you basically, you have a specific place for it, you're not really planning to move it. And Shmuel says the name of Reb Chia, kilas chasanim mutar lintosa mutar lefarka b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put it together, and you're allowed to take it apart on Shabbos. And mistama, you're going to move it in the process. So mistama is right. So it sounds like it's not muktza, even though it has a specific place. So Ella. Although it could be that, right, so I think that actually putting together this kilas chasanim might only be referring to putting up the drape. I don't know if building the actual bed would be allowed, but I think kind of putting up this sheet over it would be allowed. And Rashi also points out that it's not going to be making an oil because this beam is less than a tefach, so it's not going to be an oil. But I guess that while you're doing it, you're going to end up moving stuff, and it's, you koveh makom, and yet we're not considering it muktza. So Ela Amar Abai, rather says Abai, B'shel chulios. Rather, the reason why you can't move this menorah is because it's made up of a bunch of different pieces, and we're concerned that if you move this menorah, you might break it. And then if you break it, you might then come to put it back together again, and you'll make a kli, which is a problem. So that's the problem with the menorah. And that's why you can't move it. If that's the case, then my time the Reb Shimon ben Lakish the Shari. Well, if we're talking about a menorah that is made up of a bunch of pieces and we're scared that it's going to break, so then how come Reb Shimon ben Lakish says that if it's a small menorah that you can, move it with one hand, well then you'd be allowed to move it. Shouldn't you still be concerned that it's going to break? So, my chulios ke'ein chulios. So Abaye answers no. It doesn't actually mean really that it's made out of pieces. It's like it's made out of pieces. So it's made all out of one piece, okay? But there are etches in the design, and it looks like it could be made out of a bunch of pieces. The izba chidke, because it has these etches. Hilkach, the chulios, if it's mamish made out of pieces, ben gedola ben katana asura l'taltala. Whether it is a big menorah, whether it's a small menorah, you won't be allowed to move it because we have to be concerned that it might break. Okay. Now, gedola, nami de'iz b'chidke gezer atu gedola de chulios. And also when it comes to a large candelabra, a large menorah, so both Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan would agree that you cannot move it. Even if it just has etches in it, it's not actually made out of pieces, because people might be concerned that, people might think that this menorah is actually made out of a bunch of pieces. And even though it's really not. But if you can move this big one that's made, that just has etches in it, people might think, oh, you can move, a menorah that is made up of a bunch of pieces, and then they'll move that menorah, and if it breaks, they'll fix it, and that's a problem. So therefore, both Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan agree that if it's a large menorah, even if it just has, etches in it, you would not be allowed to move it. But kiplige bektana, de'iz b'chidke, where they argue though, is by a small menorah that has these etches in it. Marsavar gazrinan, marsavar lo gazrinan. Rabbi Yochanan says, look, we also make a gzera there, and say that you can't move this smaller menorah that has etches, because we have to be concerned that you might end up moving a smaller one that is made up of pieces and it might break. Whereas Rish Lakish says you do not need to make a gzera by this small one that has etches. As Rashi says, because everyone knows that they're not made out of these little pieces because it's small. Okay, fine. Very good. Okie dokie. Well, that was Daf Memhei Amud. Well, that was Daf Memhei of Masechta Shabbos. Let's do a recap of the Daf. So we started off with a few different opinions about Reb Shimon when it comes to muktza. Where does he sort of relent and say that there is muktza? So Rabbi Yochanan said that pointed out really, because I don't think anybody would really argue with this, but that when you have something that is muktza mitzvaso, so then Reb Shimon would agree that it's muktza. So for example, sukkah decorations, you set them aside for the context of a mitzvah. So therefore for the entire sukkahs, as long as there's a mitzvah of sukkah, so you wouldn't be able to, get benefit from the decorations of the sukkah. Now, Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel that dried figs and raisins, right? That when you're drying these fruits, so it goes through a period where it's inedible, because it's sort of like no longer fresh and not yet dried, and it's, I guess, like rotten. So during that period, Reb Shimon would admit that would be muktza, because there's mamish nothing that you can do with it at all. Rebbe, in explaining, in answering his son about these dates that have not yet been, that are not yet ripe, he invoked the same idea, which is that only dried figs and raisins would be muktza according to Reb Shimon. To which we then get into trying to understand what's Rebbe's take on the whole machlokas Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda, because from his response to his son, it would sound like he holds like Reb Shimon, and yet we have another brisa where he's talking about the definition of what these undomesticated animals would be that would be muktza on Yom Tov and you can't shech, which sounds like he holds like Reb Yehuda. So we gave three answers over there. One was that these undomesticated animals are like figs and dried figs and grapes, in that you basically send them away, and they're not really fit for anything right now. Another one would be that he actually holds like Rabbi Yehuda, and when he was talking about Rabbi Shimon's opinion to his son, it was only to answer his son's question about Rabbi Shimon's opinion, but he doesn't necessarily hold that way. The other one would be to say that he holds like Rabbi Shimon, just that in this machlokes about midbarios, he's saying, look, I don't actually hold the muktza, but you, Rabbanan, you do hold the muktza, so I disagree on your definitions of these things for how you would determine muktza, and that's the only thing he was saying to them. And then we get into understanding Rabbi Yochanan's position regarding muktza. First, Rabbi Bar Chana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that they said that he holds like that the halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. So we assume that it means that Rabbi Yochanan also says that halacha is like Rabbi Shimon. We then ask the kasha about what about the story by this bird's nest where Rabbi Yochanan says you can't move that, it's a bird's nest. And we managed to kind of say how you could still say that Rabbi Shimon would also say you can't move it because has an egg in there, which it has a chick in the egg, and therefore it's not fit for anything at all. You can't even feed it to your animal. Okay, fine. The other way to say is that Itaka holds like Rabbi Yehuda, like Rabbi Yitzchak, Rabbi Yosef said when he came from Israel, that Rabbi Yochanan actually holds like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, fine. Then Abai asked the kasha on Rabbi Yosef, said, but didn't you already know that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda from the story of Rav Asi? They didn't want to move the candelabra, and then it's like, well, candelabras are different because even Rabbi Shimon would admit that you can't use a candelabra. Oh, you can't move a candelabra. Okay, Beseder. That was Daf Memhe. Okay, have an awesome day. Bye-bye.